Now, for the latest on Greece and the financial crisis, I'm joined by Mario Seccareccia. He's a professor of economics at the University of Ottawa. I want to thank you for joining us. You're also an editor of a journal on economics and politics, and that journal had a very interesting piece of analysis comparing Greece's drop in GDP over the last 5 years to that of the 1929 collapse in the U.S., which is referred to as the Great Depression. We mentioned earlier the EU is coming to the rescue in a sense, but isn't it enough to right the ship?
Not at all. I mean, it's kind of ironic that we have the financial markets today almost celebrating, what happened with the acceptance on the part of the Greek Parliament that they would go ahead with this agreement, from last, during the night of Sunday. However, I think everybody knew it before the referendum, of course, during the negotiations. In fact, even the IMF, there were researchers at the IMF who were saying very clearly there's no way that Greece will be able to pay, or even, given the commitments that they were asking of it, that they would be able to make those commitments and indeed follow them through. And hence, already before, then after the referendum, as we know, or indeed now, nothing has changed. The prospects of Greece right now in being able to achieve any growth rate that is of any importance here are, to say the least, very, very bleak. And indeed, if you look at some of the what part of the agreement was, not the part about raising taxes or whatever, they're even creating that a fund for privatization and so on. What was the biggest problem was demanding of Greece that within the next 3 years it will achieve a primary surplus. That is to say, a surplus, meaning that there are going to be greater revenues than expenditures. When we abstract from the interest payments on the public debt, there would have to be 3.5% of their gross domestic product. That is an impossible dream. I don't think anybody seriously could actually argue that that will happen. It's very difficult to imagine that. And therefore, it's a bit of an illusion, I think, what's going on right now. I don't think at all that I'm sorry, yes?
Well, I was going to say the banks are going to reopen. That, of course, is good news. But one Harvard economist, kind of to echo what you were saying, was recently quoted as saying they're in free fall at the moment. So in the very near term, this situation is extremely grim, likely to get worse before it gets better. And when you describe what you just described, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It sounds like it's going to get worse for a long while before it gets better.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a long-term problem here. Now, indeed, I'm not going to tell you there's any simple solution here, but the problem here is simply that the debt that Greece has accumulated is completely unsustainable. Now, there are all kinds of reasons for that, but one of them, of course, is simply the fact that over the last 5-6 years, it's gone through its own Great Depression, meaning that we've had GDP, think of the national income falling by around 25% or more. Unemployment rates that are like, really Great Depression rates. That is not going to generate any surpluses anytime soon. And this is why I think that unless they're able to restructure the debt in some way, it will be, as I said, it's a game of charade, but at the end of the road, I think it's more like a musical chair game where we're playing around, but we already know in advance, in this case, who will be left, without a chair. And Greece, I think, will remain that way for a long while, and heavily dependent on the Eurozone for funding, and indeed also, as I said, perhaps some specific special measures supported by the ECB itself, the European Central Bank, which in this whole game, this whole kind of political charades that went on over the last 2 weeks, has played a very terrible role, despite what Mario Draghi says right now that they want to help Greece. I mean, the fact that they refuse to provide liquidity, which is the basic means of payments. Remember, it's the euro. And a central bank, it's in the obligations of a modern central bank to provide liquidity in times of crises, of systemic crises when people are trying to pull money out of the banks. This is like the 1930 scenarios, and at the time what governments did ultimately was to create central banks that would be lenders of last resort when there's a systemic crisis, and the European Central Bank refused to do that.
Well, Mario,
so in that regard,
we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your analysis. Appreciate you taking the time to visit with us from Ottawa.